Hello, everyone. Our webinar will begin in just a few moments. Thank you. Hello, and welcome everyone to the Product Safety and Crisis Management webinar series sponsored by UL. We are excited to have you here for our fourth and final session of the series. My name is Beth Ann Yakubu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Emerson Leadership Institute in the St. Louis University, at St. Louis University in the Richard A. Chaffetz School of Business, where the Emerson Leadership Institute designs and delivers professional development programs and leadership training. We are so excited, again, to have you today and to have a moderator and contributor for our series and Lisa Trophy. Lisa is the managing director of JPMA, as well as a contributor to ASTM, and she has had many leadership roles within the industry, including appearing before Congress. And she's also a graduate of St. Louis University programs, product safety programs. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa and welcome you to enjoy your session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth Ann. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and welcome again to the fourth and final session of this first inaugural webinar series of 2021. As those who have been with us for the first three webinars of product safety and crisis management know, we've devoted our learning outcomes to surviving and thriving during times of crisis. And no better time to do so than now, as the pandemic continues to grip our planet for the foreseeable future. Specifically, we've examined the myriad of challenges posed by consumer products in global crises. And last week, we were able to get insight into the management of people during various crisis situations. To close out our first webinar series, we are so fortunate to have someone who can guide us into the future and give us something to think about in terms of challenges ahead. These are challenges that affect not just our field of product safety, but the quality of life that our civilization will find itself facing in the coming decades. Today's session is What's Next? Preparing for the Future. Before I introduce our distinguished presenter, I have just a couple of housekeeping announcements for all of you. This session is being recorded and will be posted along with the other three webinars on the SPSP website. So if you've missed it or would like to share with a colleague, please feel free to visit and you can view and download from there. We have muted all participants, but we welcome your questions and look forward to answering them at the end of our session today. So at the bottom of your screen, please use the Q&A function to enter your questions as you think of them, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of the session. And so we are so fortunate in having Ken Boyce serve as our guide to the future. He has unique credentials to help us close out this webinar series with a sense of purpose and understanding of how we can both learn from and apply the lessons of the past as we prepare for the future. Ken is a corporate fellow in the William Henry Merrill Society at UL, reserved for the highest level of technical achievement, external recognition, and contributions to UL's safety mission. He also serves as Global Senior Director, Principal Engineering Industrial, overseeing technical operations and standards development for energy and industrial automation, built environment, and engineered materials. Ken is very active in the standards and code development community, and he represents UL in global energy initiatives, as well as serving as the chairman of UL's Energy Council. He works closely with the US Department of Energy, national laboratories, and academic institutions to advance scientific knowledge, including leading a number of significant renewable energy projects. He's a frequent speaker on energy, safety and risk management, and technology at global symposia, government events, and universities. He's also an active advocate for consumer safety and STEM education. I am very much looking forward to hearing Ken's perspective on preparing for the future while still entrenched in our current global crisis, and I know all of you are as well. So again, please submit your questions as you think of them in the Q&A box at the bottom. And Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you, Beth Ann. It's a delight to be here to speak with everyone today. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to take us on a journey into the future. So let's see what we see ahead of us. Next slide, please. Taylor, I think we want to save the video for later. If we could go to the slide deck, that would be great. And back one. Okay, that's okay. We can go to the first slide. One more. There we go. All right, thank you. It's certainly been a difficult time for humanity across the world. And it's not the first time that humanity has faced significant challenges. Certainly World War II and 1918 have been extremely challenging for society. It's certainly not the last. But as we look forward to the future, we do want to think about what is ahead of us. And some of you may have read the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a fun and enlightening book. There's also been a movie and a TV series made from it. And it's actually based on the concept that there's a travel guide for traveling through space from planet to planet. And inside the cover of this travel guide are printed words that can help us all as we navigate challenges and uncertainty. Next slide, please. Don't panic. And we won't panic. We have too much at stake to do that, but we do want to have a clear-eyed view of what lies ahead of us in the future. And it's really valuable for safety professionals so we can best coordinate our activities now to ensure that we have a safe and productive future for humanity. So let's take a look at what some of those factors might be that will influence all of us going forward. Next slide, please. The US government has actually studied a number of megatrends, these world-changing patterns in society, healthcare, government, and resources, and have identified a number of critical factors that will influence the world in the coming years. The first is individual empowerment. In the next 15 years, it's estimated that the majority of the world's population will no longer be impoverished. And this is mind-blowing in some ways, but it actually is a first for the world. And that freedom from impoverishment will grant people additional empowerment and autonomy in conducting their lives. We've seen the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation certainly being active along with many other institutions in lifting the world out of poverty. And it really is a significant aspect of societal future as both a cause and an effect of other megatrends. We also see significant demographic trends happening. We're going to explore those in more detail soon, but North America and Europe will probably lose influence and status as developing countries in Asia become more prominent in establishing themselves as world powers. We expect that China will have the world's largest economy in the coming years, and we'll see a significant shift in the health of the global economy being more diffused among different countries rather than being tightly consolidated in a very finite number. Demographic patterns continue to affect the world. Fewer children, aging populations, migration, and urbanization all will lead to a dramatically different world by 2030. We'll have about 8 billion plus people by that time. And human civilization will be both older and more focused on city life. And we'll certainly see a growing demand for food, water, and energy. Estimates are that by 2050, we'll see those rise respectively by 60, 55, and 80%. So that continued impact will affect us all significantly. Next slide, please. So we see a number of these overarching global societal trends. We talked about migration to cities, and we'll do a deeper dive in that shortly. Aging population is a very significant factor in certain countries like Japan, for example, and we'll see also significant loss of professional expertise as generational trends continue. We see increased embracing of technology by younger and future generations. There's an increasing focus on climate change, carbon, and sustainability. Certainly, the idea of severe weather events is something that touches all of us in its own unique way, depending upon where we live, but it's something that really does have a profound effect on the future. And we're all certainly appreciative of the risks associated with epidemics and pandemics, and we'll also see some interesting challenges with disease vectors changing based on global warming. Next slide, please. So this is a visualization of the human footprint today, and you can see the brighter areas are more intensely populated. It's not actually representative of lighting from space at night, but it's very similar to that just because we can see those clusters of population. And it shows how the world is populated today. But that will be changing as we go forward. Next slide, please. Here's another way of looking at that. If you look at all of the area covered in blue, it has actually less population today than the area in red, which is clustered in India and Bangladesh. And that is really an amazing statement about how population can be extremely complex. But again, the patterns are changing significantly. Next slide, please. Here's a view of what's happening in cities, urban growth per hours in different cities around the world. And you can see there are places such as Lagos, Nigeria, that are adding an average of 85 citizens every hour. Amazing. Delhi, 79 citizens every hour on average. And so we're seeing an amazing clustering in cities that we're going to talk a little bit more about. Next slide, please. So this is my hometown, Chicago, but it could be any city around the world because that is really going to significantly influence the human future. We're increasingly becoming a planet of cities. In the year 1850, less than 10% of the world's population lived in cities. Now it's about 50%, slightly more. And experts predict that by the year 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will live in an urban setting. Some experts predict that may go as high as 80% ultimately before it caps out. And so this massive human migration to cities is so large, it's difficult to envision. And in the year 2050, those cities will be very different than the ones you think of as today's population centers. Today's largest city, Tokyo, will still be in the top 10 by 2050, but is projected to be growing at a much slower rate or even possibly shrinking. There will be 5 of these megacities in Southern Asia. Mumbai is projected to have 42 million people. That's larger than many countries. Delhi, Dhaka, Kolkata, and Karachi. And more in Africa as we see the future unfolding. There's a fantastic book by the Harvard economist Edward Glaser that highlights just how important cities can be. The Triumph of the City is a great book about how cities can actually offer wonderful new opportunities for intellectual stimulation, for growth, and for wealth accrual. And so that really can be a positive for many people in terms of their future. That's city environment. It also really is helpful in terms of energy consumption. The per capita energy consumption for city dwellers is significantly lower. In fact, there was a study on Manhattan residents, and the average consumption from an energy standpoint per capita for Manhattan residents was similar to most of the world in the 1920s because of the use of public transportation and walking and bicycling. So there's some real opportunities for us as a civilization to advance the interests of all people by tapping into that urban migration. Next slide, please. So what are those cities going to be like? Well, here's a quick peek at 2010, top 20 cities by population. These all look familiar to us as the largest cities in the world. But as we look forward to 2050, we see quite a change. Let's go to the next slide, please. So now we start to see a clustering of population centers, the largest population centers really in Southern Asia and Africa. And North America looks roughly the same, but we're also seeing a similar phenomenon as we go forward into the future there as well. Next slide, please. So let's just pause and look at this. By the year 2100, the largest cities in the world are all projected to be in Southern Asia and Africa. None in the Americas, none in Europe, none in Australia. It really is an amazing demographic shift that's underway. And these cities are going to be building new infrastructure, accommodating many new citizens. And so there's obviously a high stake for us to make sure that as that infrastructure is built and renovated, that it's done in the most advantageous way for humanity, which has significant implications from a sustainability standpoint, as we'll talk about later. So we see this tremendous shift in population to Africa and Asia as the largest population centers in the human future. Let's take the next slide, please. Take a look at the Anthropocene challenges. So the Anthropocene era is a term that was coined by Nobel laureate Paul Crutzen to reflect that humans themselves are really a force of nature now. That's a differentiation from the Holocene era, which started at the end of the Ice Age. And factors like the Industrial Revolution, increasing rate of human impact means we're changing the Earth's atmosphere faster than at any time in the last 100,000 years. The impact and human dynamics lead to some critical and interrelated issues that increasingly have an impact on human safety and security. And what we see here is the classic S-curve of bacterial growth. And so you have a period where the growth is just starting. There's a rapid logarithmic increase in the population. And then as the bacteria reaches the end of the food supply or the petri dish, you start to see that tap off into a stationary phase and then a decline because the resources have been completely used up. And this is certainly something we do not want to see with the human race, but there are challenges for us to face open-eyed if we're going to make sure that happens. There are about 7.8 billion people on the planet right now, and that is estimated to be about 9.8 billion by the year 2050. So ensuring that we have enough food and water will continue to be a challenge. Continued resilience on fossil fuels is being reduced somewhat by renewable energy. We'll talk more about that later, but additional work is still needed, especially as we see the results on climate. And climate change also can have a dramatic effect on food security, water availability, energy infrastructure, and disease vectors. So these things are all interrelated in potentially very negative ways. Stanford University biologists estimate that humans consume about 40 to 50% of the Earth's output of plants and animals, just that one species of humans, and that certainly has been trending up. So we see these threats from global warming and unsustainable reliance on fossil fuel use as being very challenging, but also as we couple that with that migration of humans to cities, it's also worth noting that the United Nations estimates that even today, about 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of coast. And about half of the projected top 25 cities in 2050 are coastal. So if we think about the implications of global warming on these urban centers in close proximity to a coast, it could be catastrophic. We also have the World Health Organization estimating that 7 million people die each year from air pollution, much of it from burning fossil fuels. And so there's a tremendous health impact that we can do, that we can take and accomplish if we just move forward together in a more reasoned way. So what does that look like? Next slide, please. It's a fantastic book that Charles Mann has written called The Wizard and the Prophet. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. It's a really interesting study of competing visions for the future. William Vaught is our prophet. He's the gentleman on the top. He was focused on really visionary work in the middle of the last century on causing humans to reckon with overpopulation and the very real dangers it would cause for food security, the environment, and for future generations. Norman Borlaug is our wizard. He's there on the bottom. And he was focused on using science to redefine what can be done. He is remembered as the father of the so-called Green Revolution that used scientific methods to develop more robust crops, enabling the feeding of literally billions of people and supporting reduced deforestation. He was also awarded a Nobel Prize. These two people were rivals, often at odds about fundamental views and policy directives. And Mann makes the case that a person really cannot be both a prophet and a wizard. I personally think that both views are highly relevant for our collective future. And while facing the overarching challenges will be a continued imperative for humanity, let's take a look at how innovation and technology will help society in the future for the rest of our time together. Next slide, please. So innovation is really our magic sauce, right? That we can use to drive new outcomes for the human condition and the future generations that will count on us to leave them a world that they can inhabit. Next slide, please. Let's look at what types of catalysts can drive innovation. Stephen Johnson has made an excellent study of this in the book, Where Good Ideas Come From, The Natural History of Innovation. And he lays out several critical pillars for innovation to occur. The adjacent possible is a kind of shadow future, right? The things that aren't being done today, but can be done based on what we are doing today. And as that changes tomorrow, it unlocks a new adjacent possible. And that really is critical for us to continue to push out on, to think, what can we do to innovate for a better future? The example of the astronauts on Apollo 13, the astronauts trapped with a finite set of things that they could use to save themselves, is a great example of the adjacent possible, as they started to use this finite list of items to unlock the adjacent possible and find a way for their safe return to Earth. Liquid networks are formed of people who have very different perspectives and skill sets. So they come at issues from widely ranging perspectives, and that really drives the generation of new ideas and new innovations. The slow hunch is reflecting the idea that innovation is generally not the result of a single person or a single individual. It comes from a hunch colliding with another hunch, colliding with another hunch, and those things collectively leading to a new way of doing things. A great example of this is Tim Berners-Lee of CERN, supporting the development of his hunch about document sharing, which eventually led to the internet. Serendipity reflects the fact that sometimes things happen by accident and they have wonderful consequences. And the opportunities for us to unlock some of those unexpected outcomes is really heightened by technology as we look forward. Things like artificial intelligence that can really accelerate the way we can understand what those opportunities for serendipity might be. Error highlights the fact that learning what does not work sometimes is as important as what does work in leading to a breakthrough. And Thomas Edison, for example, using countless materials and exploring the incandescent lamp until he finally found the one that worked, led him to state that genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And this really reflects that sometimes we make mistakes in order to move forward. Acceptation it's a biological term that describes a shift in function of a trait during evolution. But in terms of innovation, it really means that you can find a breakthrough in one place that really can help you in another place in unexpected ways. And platforms are the ways that we exchange and connect ideas. And this is really important in the concept of innovation. And Johnson makes the case that, really rich centers for innovation are a lot like coral reefs, where they have this complex interaction of different mechanisms, but there's rich, fertile ideas that can be mined there. Next slide, please. So how do we use those innovation concepts to drive forward? Well, we see quite a bit happening in technical trending right now. We're seeing a lot of replacement of traditional electromechanical solutions by software solutions, apps, et cetera, and that leads also to further digitalization. We're seeing decentralization. Things that used to be very highly centralized now are being diffused and dissipated, and that leads to an increased importance in system integration or systems of systems. We're seeing a lot more focus on mobility of solutions. We're seeing convergence of traditionally discrete domains like electric vehicles serving as portable generators. These were very separate traditional domains, and now they're converging in significant ways. And this is happening in a number of different sectors. Next slide, please. A lot of this is being driven by what's generally called the Internet of Things, right? I'm sure many of us have heard of that and are familiar with it, but it's worth noting just how incredibly profoundly affecting us this is. It really is changing our lives in ways, and this deeply entrenched system that is connecting things in ways that we never would have expected just even a few years ago is really important for us as we go forward. Next slide, please. This gives us a view of what has been happening with the Internet of Things, and it really shows that exponential growth and this rich interconnection of different things is unlocking many new opportunities for us in terms of understanding what's happening remotely and providing a sense of remote or autonomous control for things that can make us all better off. In the last 5 years, it's estimated that the number of internet connected users, people increased by 33%, while the number of internet connected devices increased by 400%. And it's important to note there are now more connected devices than there are people on Earth. Next slide, please. So this new ecosystem opens up new opportunities, but it also presents new vulnerabilities, right? These challenges are sometimes things that are not immediately visible or very easy to appreciate. So being aware of and addressing these challenges will be collectively important for us as we move forward. And it's data is the oil, as it said, that drives the Internet of Things. Next slide, please. So there's been more data generated in the last few years than in all of the previous history of human civilization, which is really an incredible concept to embrace. And so there's a lot of data that's moving around. Well, how do we use that data and how should we use it? So there's a lot of different ways that we can use it, right? To empower active decisions by user where you know something now and you can take action. But it also could be autonomous, right? It could support predictive analytics so that we can use data to project into the future and do things more proactively. We can certainly create intelligent systems of interconnected devices, and that will have a profound effect on our future as we tap into machine learning. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for safety professionals? Well, we know we need to navigate certain issues in data-driven systems, right? Interoperability, things need to be able to interact and reliably communicate. And that's important both as they're connected and then over the system life. We'll see increased wireless communication certainly in the future. And there are complexities there, including electromagnetic immunity and compatibility in general. Rigor of the assessment of data-reliant devices and systems becomes increasingly important so that we make sure we get the right outcomes the right way. And then functional safety, which is the use of a coordination of software, firmware, and hardware to accomplish safety outcomes, has been used for many years. It's becoming increasingly important. And there are certainly enormous relevancies for the human race as we go forward in making sure that's done properly and also having software safety updates. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do more in from a safety perspective as we go forward in these data-driven systems? There's a really compelling aspect that we'll need to navigate about delegation and acceptance of autonomy, right? Are we willing to give up the right to make that decision ourselves as it relates to some safety feature? And are we willing to delegate that to an autonomous entity? The interfaces and user cognition to make sure that we know what we're doing and we know all of the consequences of what we're doing in these data-driven systems, I think will be really challenging for us as safety professionals to navigate. The commissioning of machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence features is going to be increasingly important. We certainly see it play out in ways that affect convenience, but I think we'll see more and more of that from autonomous vehicles to other technologies playing out in ways that may have profound safety consequences. Making sure we have the right access to data so that we have the ability to leverage that data and drive a better future can provide really wonderful new opportunities for us, but it also means we're going to be diligent about driving access to that data. And then cybersecurity is one that we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive in. Next slide, please. So we're all familiar with the concept of cyber attacks, but as we see more and more of this connected technology, the very fact that the technologies are connected means they're vulnerable to cyber attacks. And so how does that happen? Well, there's these three concepts that are essential to a cyber attack, and the intersection point is where it becomes a reality. You have to have a threat, and that's the attacker, and it could be an individual, or it could be an organized effort, or it could be a nation. You have a flaw. There's some way for them to get in there, and it could be, bad code, for example, or other things. And then there's the opportunity for that to be exploited. And when those three things intersect, that's when you have a cyber attack. And as we go forward, with all of these interconnected devices that will have increasing aspects of safety-related functionality, making sure we have the rigor of that infrastructure being protected from cyber attacks will be increasingly important for all of us. Next slide, please. So let's take a peek at the smart infrastructure of the future. And some of these things are definitely being built now, but we see this really playing out across Industry 4.0 and digital factories, logistics and supply chain, again, with more of a focus on drone deliveries and autonomous vehicles in the future. We see certainly a tremendous move toward e-mobility on a global scale. Energy management is important. We'll talk a little bit more about that soon. And smart buildings are increasingly becoming important as we've continued to drive toward this intelligent infrastructure. Next slide, please. So let's take a little bit of a peek at energy, because it is so important to our future, and it's certainly close to my heart. We see here this tremendous focus on increasing energy. The OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, has 37 member countries. They're shown in blue. And so we see an increase in those countries' energy consumption, but reflecting those patterns that we saw in our previous view of global migration, we see the non-OECD countries really significantly driving up in energy consumption as the populations grow so dramatically. And so this means we will need to continue to work more toward building a secure energy future. Right now, renewables are the fastest growing energy sector in most of the world, but there's still a low part of the overall energy portfolio, and it does require that we continue to focus on that. Next slide, please. But let's look at the art of the possible. May 15th, 2016, almost 5 years ago now, we saw a significant milestone. Germany, the first industrialized country, had its entire country's energy needs met by renewables. It was a result of the enormous commitment that Germany has made to renewable energy, both in terms of wind and solar power. And it was part of their so-called Energiewende, the energy transformation. They committed to not use nuclear and not use fossil fuels and really replace those with renewables. And this was an amazing moment. It was a bright, sunny, windy day. Energy prices went negative for a period, but it just shows that it is possible for us to do this in industrialized countries and as we build more infrastructure in new areas going forward. Next slide, please. So as we build this energy internet, there's, I think, a really interesting aspect that highlights, again, both the challenges and opportunities of connectivity. So distributed resources are really powerful. They empower energy consumers to do things, whether it's rooftop solar or an energy storage system or both. They can communicate in different ways, cooperate. It certainly adds resilience to the system because we don't necessarily rely as much on a single plant producing energy. It's much more distributed. Buildings are not just loads that demand energy, but they become collaborators with the grid, which I think is a really amazing experiment that's been carried out successfully in places like California and Hawaii. We see the vehicle and infrastructure domains converging, as we had talked about earlier. So now these things that used to be entirely separate are now interconnected in very powerful ways and unlock new opportunities. And again, data drives the idea of how can we manage the grid. Virtual power plants allow us to make sure things happen the right way. Smart inverters allow us to make sure that the grid doesn't go down on a hot day in California. And this is all being enabled by what we're doing in the renewable world. Next slide, please. And it's also happening on a city level. So we're seeing these smart cities really start to pick up steam in places around the world. There's a lot of definitions about what that looks like. But the idea of being able to use technology to really understand what's happening in a city in ways that we really never could understand before, and then act on that in meaningful ways in the interests of the city's citizens is really an exciting time. Next slide, please. So here's a peek. We talked about the population growth. We've talked about urban population going up significantly. We talked about these increasing demands for water, energy, and food. And so this is a really, I thought, compelling way to think about it. Every year we see urban populations growing by about 5 million. So that's a new Chicago every month for 30 years. And we have this incredible challenge to our infrastructure in terms of degradation and in terms of the need for building out a new infrastructure in places that haven't necessarily been built out. Next slide, please. So smart cities, I think, offer tremendous opportunity for humanity. But I think there's a really critical aspect to this that all of us need to make sure we keep in mind. So we see things like digital technologies used to enhance urban services, make the lives of the citizens better, intelligence and critical infrastructure. I think the real key concept here is that we want to make sure that we make the lives of all citizens better, right? And bringing that sense of equity and justice to the way we apply the technology to help everybody, not a limited few, I think is really the promise of smart city technology. And we're seeing this become more and more of a factor as we see increased competition among cities for things like the Amazon headquarters, right? So having that infrastructure as well as a rich university ecosystem, as well as a rich business ecosystem, are things that are really important. So we'll see the smart city technology really drive cities forward as we see more people moving to those cities. Next slide, please. And again, here's just a glimpse of what we've seen in the increase in smart city devices. Again, it looks like an exponential growth, right? Which is what we would expect because there are incredible new technologies being rolled out, best practices being shared, and there's opportunities for us to really learn from those. Next slide, please. So these technological platforms and enablers really lead to wonderful new opportunities, things like 5G and artificial intelligence, but they also lead to new issues and challenges as we see here. And as we move forward from the more physical world to the more virtual world, it really will require a strong presence from safety professionals to make sure that that's being done properly. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at a few of these. There's certainly many, but we'll take a look at a few that I think will have really important effects in the coming years. We're seeing more and more robotics. They'll continue to impact our lives. That could be a human companion robot that's being used in Tokyo. It could be an autonomous robot that helps deliver services for people in an airport. It could be these exoskeletons or augmentations that allow people to do work safely, whether it's in a commercial or a residential setting. And they really can produce amazing benefits for target populations such as the aged, right? Or people with physical challenges, that now technology can allow them to do things or do things in an easier way than they could otherwise accomplish those. Next slide, please. Mobility and battery systems are inextricably linked. We as consumers want more mobility. We want to be able to do anything, anywhere. And that all is powered by battery technology. And that really today is mostly lithium-ion batteries. There's about 6 billion lithium-ion batteries a year that are introduced into the market. And they're becoming smaller, more powerful, more common, and more global, which means that there are more challenges and more risk that we need to navigate in the safety world going forward. Next slide, please. Machine learning and artificial intelligence will become increasingly important. Again, the technology is well established, but when you start to move from Siri helping you find a recipe to making sure that protective features from a safety standpoint are being implemented properly, it really becomes critical that we've thought through this the right way. And so, enabling more autonomy, as we've discussed, can be good, especially if it's a decision to do that. But we're also going to see this continued evolution to what does that look like in the future. And machine learning and artificial intelligence thrive on data sets. You need to challenge them and train them and validate them with the proper data sets so you ensure that you get the right outcomes. And so how do you do that as you start to see a safety related implication for machine learning really becomes important as we go forward. And those human interfaces, again, will remain critical so that we don't get those unintended outcomes. We also see a lot of interest in cloud-based algorithms being used, and sometimes algorithms being moved up to the cloud and down to a device. And again, as you start to see safety implications for what that means, it will be tremendously important that we're proactively addressing this together. Next slide, please. I did want to mention the circular economy. It really is a critical factor from a sustainability standpoint as we go forward, and it reconfigures that take, make, waste economy into a much more engaged, much more sophisticated way to limit our use of resources and get the full value and opportunity from the resources that we have taken. And so it really is going to transform the world as we go forward. And it really is essential that we continue to commit to that on a global scale for our sustainable future. But it also means we have to co-manage circularity and safety to a really good outcome from both perspectives. We don't want circularity to introduce safety hazards, for example, from an improperly reconditioned product that electrocutes somebody. So it's going to be important that we as safety professionals really actively manage this. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does this mean for safety professionals? Well, my view, I think, is we respect the profits. The message is critical. We do need to be mindful of our future and what we leave for future generations. We also want to support the wizards, right? We want to unlock the art of the possible and do it in a safe way and act to drive both of those mindsets in the broader population. We want to continue to evolve and apply human factors as these profound changes occur and digital technology becomes more present. We want to think about hazard assessments in a different way and really system thinking as more and more systems of systems are going to affect safety implications for the general public. We want to recognize and mitigate the risks of technological dependence or over-reliance, right? We don't want people to be so reliant on technology that they can't make their own safety decisions and they inappropriately delegate responsibility to technology and end up resulting in a safety concern. So we really need to think about that as safety professionals. And we really do, I think, have a role to lead the way to safe and sustainable solutions. So with that, Taylor, if you can show the video now, I think that would be great. And I'd like to just, this is Amanda Gorman, as many of you know, we know her from the President Biden's inauguration, but this is actually from a few years ago where she has a message for the future. They're very thought-provoking, both from a standpoint of sustainability and also for us, I think, as safety professionals. So when you're ready. Oh, and Taylor, I'm not sure we're hearing the audio.
Their eyes are. On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited orbited the moon. Those three guys were surprised to see from their eyes a planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, a first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes. Some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where, despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training in sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything but controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots, we will fail you not, just as we chose to go to the moon. We know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as the weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an Earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising, all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Lisa, back to you.
Thank you for that, Ken. That was quite a powerful way to end your remarks here today. And thank you for all that you shared. We do have quite a few really great questions here in the chat, so I'll pose a few of them to you, and we'll see how many we have time for.
Sounds great.
So the first is here: with the exponential increase in wireless and connected devices, is there, in your opinion, enough science to support the fact that they are safe for humans and the environment? And, you know, how can we really look to assess the cumulative effect of those?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I mean, certainly we all are very connected to our phones, right? And the good news is there has been quite a bit of scientific research that has been done to support the safe use of wireless communication devices. Like any scientific activity, that continues to be something that is studied with the intent of looking for new insights that can help make sure people stay safe. I think we can feel secure in using our wireless communication devices now. As we move to the 5G platform, there have been some allegations that there are other potential health threats that have not been scientifically substantiated at this point. So again, the scientific process is that you posit a theory and you test it, and then you learn from it and posit another theory. So I think we'll continue to work on that continuously as we go forward, but I think we have every reason to be secure in the use of wireless communication devices today.
Great, thank you for that. And so a couple of questions related here about the early slides and the trend in population growth and changing where that is globally. And so the first being, do we think that major metropolitan areas, cities will continue to grow with our current COVID situation? And what other human crises or pandemic may be before us that we don't know about? And as a follow-up, any insight into why those cities in Asia and Africa will be the largest in the future?
Okay, great. Yeah, so first, I think it is interesting because possibly many of us live in cities or know people who live in large metropolitan areas. And we certainly, I think, have seen that has presented enormous challenges in terms of pandemic management, right? There are some health challenges that have been more difficult in urban settings in many cases. People have left cities temporarily or for good in some cases. But I think in the overarching trend, I think the COVID pandemic itself will be a blip in that migration to cities. Could there be other health events that supplant that and cause a change in that trend? Yes, that's certainly possible. But I think the reasons that we have this incredible migration to cities are driven by factors that far outweigh those pandemic issues that are very top of mind for us now, very significant for all of us right now, but may not have a lasting effect. In terms of why the tremendous growth in Southern Asia and Africa, I mean, I think we're seeing population trends and demographic trends are just very different there. And I think, again, coupled with this idea of having more food security, having better access to clean water, being free from the limitations of impoverishment, that's a good thing for humanity. And I think it starts to unlock new opportunities for people in those locations as we go forward. And that really, I think those geopolitical, societal aspects are really what will drive that amazing population growth in those locations. Now, that could that change? Of course it could. Those are projections, right? If we have global warming have a profound effect on the available water or the temperature of some of these locations, could that change? Yes, it's certainly possible. But I think there's a pretty well-established body of knowledge that is the reasoned projection based on everything we know today.
Great, absolutely makes sense. And so, considering those growth rates and the increase in infrastructure needs, and as all of those things continue to play out, and these cities become smart cities, what do you see as some of the more critical safety risks in the smart cities as opposed to where we stand today?
Yeah, great question. So let me first say that this is an amazing fact that was shared with me. If you think about everything that's built on the face of the planet today, every building that exists on Earth today, in the next 40 years, that footprint will double. And so I think if the concept of that amazing growth of a built infrastructure, if we do it the right way, we do it with the best technological approaches, the most sustainable approaches. We do it with a view to safety and human well-being. That could position us for a transformational future, which is really positive. If we repeat the mistakes of the past, it's going to make things a lot more challenging for us. And I think that's where the smart city and smart building technologies really offer a lot of promise. I think, again, in terms of understanding what's happening in ways and levels of detail where literally billions of data points are being collected and analyzed and acted upon. That's a really, really powerful way for us to build a better future. And it exists, right? So it could be air quality, it could be, crime detection, it could be traffic congestion and modifying the way traffic is flowing through a city so that you have less pollution, less pedestrian hazards, you're leveraging autonomous technologies better. That's the type of future that I think we can build, and especially always bringing it back to the well-being of all of the citizens in a just and equitable way.
Thank you for that. Very eloquent. I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up with a couple of announcements. And I think it's a good one to end with today. And with your expertise and your experience, what do you see as the most critical safety risk of the future, all things considered?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think all of us as safety professionals we're always thinking about what could be unsafe, right? You can't think about the world in a different way. I will say climate change, absolutely. I think it just has so many potentially profound effects that will potentially make people unsafe or forced to live in hazardous conditions. It's absolutely the biggest challenge we face. And the good news is I'm an optimist as well as a safety professional, and we can do this. We just have to set our minds to it.
We can do this. Thank you, Ken, so much for
Lisa.
sharing your expertise and your experience. Just a couple of quick announcements for all of our participants today. We will be posting all 4 of the webinars here in the series on the SPSP website. And all participants do have a terrific opportunity to earn a certificate of completion for participating in the series as well. So keep an eye on your inbox. In the next day or so, you'll be receiving an email from Product Safety Education, which will include the link to where you can access those webinars, as well as a link and instructions for applying for the certificate of completion for this webinar series. I want to especially thank UL for their generous sponsorship of this first series of 2021. And again, Ken, thank you so much. If I could close with just a couple of thoughts that I jotted down as a key takeaway, I think so important for us all to remember. You said early on that innovation is the magic sauce for improving outcomes for our planet, for humanity. And as product safety professionals, we all want to be shepherds of safety and sustainability. And so I think to do that, we need to do just what you said, respect the prophets and support the wizards. So with that, thank you all again for your participation today. Thank you, Ken. It's been a pleasure. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks for participating.
Thank you so much.